I don't know. I've never really been afraid of anything in a race car. The fact the fire is there always, you know, but it's not a fear.
Dale Earnhardt's crash at Daytona looked like a normal hit until the silence came. Fans waited, hoping he would climb out. But what followed was heartbreaking. It was a moment that chilled millions to the bone and changed NASCAR forever. Hidden details from that day reveal a heartbreaking truth that fans and drivers will never forget. Join us as we uncover the details. A bright day with a dark feeling. February 18, 2001 was supposed to be a day of celebration. The Daytona 500 was back, bigger and louder than ever. This wasn't just any race, it was the start of a new era for NASCAR. Fox Sports had just signed a fresh television deal and was covering its first ever NASCAR race. The production was top-notch with flashy graphics, new camera angles, and a buzzing crowd of 150,000 people at the track. Millions more were watching from home. But the star of the day was, without a doubt, Dale Earnhardt. They called him the Intimidator, and for good reason. With 7 championships under his belt, he was feared and respected by every driver on that track. That black number 3 Chevrolet was more than a car, it was a symbol. People didn't just cheer for Dale, they believed in him. When he drove, it felt like a storm was rolling in. He had that kind of energy, strong, quiet, and unshakable. Just the night before, Dale had taken football icon Terry Bradshaw for a wild ride around the speedway, laughing, gisting, and even moving toward the wall just to scare Bradshaw. Typical Dale. The world was watching and he was soaking up every minute of it. But behind the smile, there was something else. Something that didn't feel quite right. You see, Dale Earnhardt had been through a rough patch. In 1996 and 97, he struggled. Bad luck, poor finishes. And that iron confidence began to crack. Then came the injuries. In 1999 at Talladega, he broke his collarbone and sternum in a crash. Weeks later in Atlanta, he took another hit that broke a bone in his neck. The pain was constant as he could barely move his left arm when driving. The man who once gripped the wheel like a bear was now nursing bones that felt like glass. He started thinking about retirement. Richard Childress, his team owner and close friend, remembers those talks clearly. He'd say, "Maybe I'm done," Childress recalled. "But I told him, it's not you, it's the cars, I'll fix that." By the year 2000, the fire was back. Dale had fought through the worst and was driving like his old self again. That season, he finished second 5 times and won 2 races. He was back in the hunt, back in command. The Daytona 500 of 2001 was supposed to be a fresh start. Not just for Fox and NASCAR, but for Dale Earnhardt too. But fate had other plans. 2 days before the race, Earnhardt sat down for an interview with Michael Waltrip. It started like any other chat, 2 legends talking shop. But then Dale did something unexpected. He leaned forward, got this sudden burst of energy and said, "I'm a lucky man, I've got it all."
I've really got it all right now. I'm racing and enjoying it. I win, I'm competitive. But my family, everything's great there.
That line stuck with people, not because it was loud, but because it felt final. He talked about how proud he was of his son, Dale Jr. He smiled when he mentioned his wife, Teresa. He joked about owning cars that were finally beating his own on the track, but the way he said it somehow felt like a man reflecting, not just celebrating, like a man who knew something was coming. Later that same evening, Earnhardt met with another old racing buddy, Terry Labonte. The two were finalizing a business deal. Everything was smooth, laughs, handshakes, jokes. But then Dale said something that left people in the room cold. "That's if I make it that far." Immediately, the room went silent with people feeling nervous about his comment. As the race began, everything seemed to be clicking. It was one of the most exciting Daytona 500s ever run. 49 lead changes, 14 different leaders, and fast cars slicing through the pack. And there was Dale right in the thick of it. He led 4 different times that day, proving once again that he wasn't past his prime. That number 3 Chevrolet looked like it had rocket fuel in its tank. Fans screamed every time he took the lead. Fox's commentators were excited. The sport had never looked better. Mike Helton, NASCAR's president at the time, was watching from high above in the control tower. It was going perfectly, he remembered, exactly the way we hoped. But nobody saw what was coming. With 25 laps to go, all hell broke loose. Tony Stewart, driving his bright orange number 20 car, was caught in a pileup on the backstretch. He slammed into the wall, flipped in the air, and barrel rolled across the grass. Pieces of his car flew everywhere. It looked like a conflict zone. Everyone held their breath. Somehow Stewart climbed out, bruised, but okay. The car was destroyed, but the driver had walked away. Dale Earnhardt was still on the track during all this. He keyed up his radio and said something chilling to Richard Childress. "They're going to have to do something about these cars, or they're going to get someone lifeless." Unfortunately, a battle had been going on for months behind the scenes. A battle Dale had chosen to ignore. Before then, 3 drivers had passed on in less than a year: Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin Jr., and Tony Roper. All from the same kind of injury: a basilar skull fracture, a fatal break at the base of the skull, often caused when a driver's head whips hardly in a crash. Doctors knew how to prevent it. The answer was the HANDS device, a carbon fiber brace that attached to the helmet and prevented fatal neck movement. It was simple, it was tested, and it saved lives. But Dale Earnhardt wouldn't wear it. When asked why, he once responded, "I ain't wearing that damn noose." No matter how many experts tried to talk to him, he just wouldn't listen. On the day of the race, only 5 drivers wore the HANDS device. Dale wasn't one of them. As time went up, the field reset after Tony Stewart's crash, and Dale found himself in a different role. His cars, driven by Michael Waltrip and Dale Jr., were running first and second. For once, Dale wasn't going for the win. He was blocking them, protecting them. And for 17 laps, he did just that. But no one, especially Dale, knew that by putting himself in that position, he was entering the most dangerous zone on the track. The rest was only seconds away. A fatal move. On the final lap, Earnhardt wasn't chasing victory, he was shielding 2 others. Michael Waltrip and Dale Jr. sat in first and second. For 17 laps, Dale drove like a guardian angel in black, weaving in front, turning his car into a human shield. At nearly 180 mph, Dale's job was to protect. But that race car shield is also a magnet for danger. When Sterling Marlin tried to sneak underneath, Dale dove low to block classic Intimidator style. That's when the tap happened. Just a slight contact. But in NASCAR, speed is amplifying. That tap sent Dale's car down to the flat apron. For a moment it seemed he might recover. His front tires corrected and the car looked as though it would point back up the bank. But physics had other plans then. Almost like a rubber band snapping back, it shot across the track, right into the path of Ken Schrader's car. Schrader couldn't avoid it. The contact hurled Earnhardt's car toward the outside wall at nearly 160 mph. To truly get what happened, you have to understand how fast it all went down. A physicist later broke it down by describing everything that took place. It all started when Dale's car slowed down by about 44 miles per hour in just 0.08 seconds. That's around 380,000 newtons of force hitting the body. To put that in perspective, a skull can break at just 5,400 newtons of force, but Earnhardt's crash delivered nearly 70 times that. It ended before his body could even react. Dale Earnhardt's left lap belt broke during the crash. This belt was part of his safety harness, and when it failed, the whole system stopped working. His body hit the steering wheel hard, and his head snapped forward with nothing to stop it. He got a serious injury at the base of his skull, where it connects to the spine. By the time the car stopped, Dale had already stopped breathing. As the crash threw Dale's body forward, his head kept moving, no strap held it back, and then snapped. A heavy force no one could stop. Just after the crash, the number 3 Monte Carlo didn't catch fire. It didn't explode. It simply came to rest in the grass, still mostly intact. Dale's body, though, didn't match. The harness failure was confirmed by NASCAR's own Tony Helton. He'd never seen a seatbelt ripped like that after 50 years. Photos later revealed blood splattered across the interior on seats, roof, dashboard, everywhere. Forensics showed skull fragments, internal head trauma. To many, this wasn't just a rough crash, it was a painful crash. Yet these findings didn't tell all. An independent expert from Duke University reviewed the images and medical data. Dr. Barry Myers believed the seatbelt didn't cause his passing. Even if it hadn't broken, the whip effect of his head slamming forward would still have shattered his skull. He claimed the steering wheel contact might have been cosmetic. But Dale Jr.? He wasn't buying it. He believed firmly that his dad's belt breaking played a hand in that final impact. Who's right? That question still rings in the mind of NASCAR doctors and engineers to this day. Think about it this way: 80 milliseconds and your brain needs around 150 milliseconds just to notice danger. There was no slow motion moment, no hands reaching for seatbelts. No rescue team is getting ready. All just a split-second physics event, and the human body is on the losing side. In that moment, Dale's left lap belt broke. His head flew forward with nothing to stop it. His skull broke, and his life ended in less than 1/10 of a second. People watching on TV saw nothing strange as the number 3 car sat quietly in the grass. There was no big crash, no parts flying, just a still broken car. At the finish line, Michael Waltrip was celebrating, not knowing what had just happened. Only Ken Schrader, climbing out of his wrecked car, saw the truth. He ran to Dale's car and hit the window, trying to get inside. He waved at the safety crew, begging for help. This was not a normal race ending. Dr. Steve Bohannon led the EMS unit. Minutes after the crash, he reached Earnhardt's cockpit, blood from the ears, nose, and classic signs of a basilar skull break. Dale wasn't breathing. He was unconscious, unresponsive. That car ride was already a slide from which he'd never recover. Track doctors cut the roof, freed him from his car, and rushed him to Halifax Medical Center. They tried everything: chest tubes, IVs, lung inflation, blood replacement, but no sign of life. Dr. Bohannon later said that once someone shows no signs of life after that level of blunt trauma, the odds are close to zero. By the break of 5:16 p.m. on February 18, 2001, doctors officially pronounced Dale gone. 13 minutes earlier, the Daytona crowd interrupted as Michael Waltrip crossed the finish line. 5 minutes after the crash, cars had lined up for the podium while Earnhardt was lying motionless in a hospital bed. His family arrived at Halifax. Teresa, his wife, stood composed as doctors tried to take off Dale's wedding ring. The crash was a big shock to NASCAR, millions of fans, even rival drivers. For the first time, the sport's greatest star passed away on national television, brought down by physics and by system failures. Officials, including Richard Childress, felt a wave of regret and horror. "We knew what could happen, but not like that," Childress said later. "He was protecting others and got buried by it." As a result of this unfortunate incident, NASCAR began digging into their safety culture: belts, helmets, walls, even the tracks themselves. In less than 8 months, 4 drivers had passed from the same basilar skull injury: Petty, Irwin, Roper, and now Earnhardt. Something had to change, and fast. This brings us to the revolution Dale's passing brought. The safety revolution he never lived to see.
I got it all right now, Darrell. I got it all.
No, you really do.
I'm a lucky man. I have it all. I mean, the Lord's looked after us, I reckon.
Dale Earnhardt's passing didn't just affect NASCAR, it changed it forever. What happened after that crash was more than grief or shock. It became a call to action, a long overdue wake-up call that turned a dangerous sport into something smarter, safer, and more advanced. But the real heartbreak? Everything that followed could have saved his life if only it had come a little sooner. In the days following Dale's fatal crash, among the most disturbing discoveries was his seatbelt. It hadn't simply been torn loose, it had actually snapped. His left lap belt had broken clean off during the crash. And when investigators looked closely, they noticed something strange. The belt had been anchored too far from the seat. It should have been attached just a few inches away. Instead, it was mounted nearly double that distance, putting stress on it the moment the car went sideways. There was no question that the seatbelt's failure let Dale's body whip forward far harder than it should have. His chest hit the steering wheel, and his head snapped hard. Some experts say the belt failure worsened the injuries. Others believe the force of the impact would have been fatal either way. But what did they all agree on? That seatbelt shouldn't have failed like that. It led to an immediate check across the entire sport. NASCAR teams threw out old harnesses and replaced them with stronger 6-point systems. Mounting brackets were redone. Belts were no longer just tightened and trusted, they were checked, rechecked, and tested under real crash pressure. What had once been routine suddenly became urgent. And then there was the head and neck restraint, the one thing that could have changed everything. Before Dale's crash, most drivers hated the Hans device. It was stiff, uncomfortable, and felt like being strapped to a board. Drivers said it limited their ability to turn their heads or look around. Dale Earnhardt was among the loudest voices against it. He'd once called it a damn noose. When safety experts held a special demo at Daytona to show drivers how the device worked, Dale didn't even show up. But on the day of his passing, a quiet turn unfolded. Right there in the same garage area where Dale parked his car, several other drivers were getting fitted for Hans devices. Just a few feet away, some were strapping it on, adjusting it, trusting it. One of them was Kyle Petty. His own son had passed in a crash the year before. Kyle wasn't taking any chances. His Hans was sitting in the car, ready to do its job. Dale, though? He wouldn't wear it. He believed in instinct, in gut feel, in raw control. It's what made him great, but also what left him exposed. That night after the race, Hans device manufacturers were loaded with calls. Teams that had ignored them for years suddenly wanted everything they had in stock. Drivers who once mocked the device now demanded it. In one evening, more orders came in than the company had received in the previous 12 months. Still, NASCAR didn't mandate it right away. Instead, they strongly encouraged it. But just 8 months after Dale's passing, another young driver named Blaze Alexander passed in a similar crash with the same type of skull injury. That was it. NASCAR drew the line. Head and neck restraints became mandatory. No questions, no debate. But the safety upgrades didn't stop there. Concrete walls had always been part of NASCAR tracks. They were unforgiving, brutal slabs built for structure, not softness. When Dale hit the wall that day, he didn't bounce. He stopped. Hard. There was no give, no escape from the force. That changed almost overnight. A new system called safer barrier steel and foam layers that could absorb crash energy was introduced. First at Indianapolis, then slowly across every major track. These barriers looked simple, but their impact was massive. Instead of cars coming to a stop, they now had something to crush into, spreading the force across a wider area. What was once a wall of demise became a shield. And it worked. Drivers started surviving crashes that looked completely unsurvivable. One of the most dramatic examples came in 2018 when Michael McDowell crashed during a qualifying lap at Texas. His car hit the wall at over 180 miles per hour, flipped multiple times, and came to rest in flames. But thanks to the Hans safer barriers and reinforced seats, McDowell climbed out without a scratch. By then, NASCAR had also added something else: crash data recorders. These black boxes sat in every car, quietly tracking the extent of each incident. How fast, how hard, what direction the force came from, they recorded it all. This allowed engineers to study crashes in detail and redesign cars based on real impacts, not just guesses. And they did redesign the cars from the ground up. The Car of Tomorrow, as it was called when introduced in 2007, was built with safety first. Drivers sat further toward the center. The roll cages were thicker and stronger. The seats hugged the head and shoulders more tightly. It wasn't just about surviving crashes. It was about reducing the force drivers ever felt in the first place. They even added roof hatches so that if a car flipped or caught fire, the driver could escape upward. Everything from helmet design to fireproof underwear got an upgrade. Even pit crews started wearing more protection. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. NASCAR, once the sport that glorified danger, began talking about safety with pride. For decades, fans had cheered over flying pieces and smoking wreckage. But after Dale, they looked at things differently. Suddenly, it wasn't cool to resist safety, it was foolish. As younger drivers embraced the changes, veterans fell in line and soon team owners started investing in crash research. It became clear, no victory lap was worth anyone's life. And the results speak for themselves. Since Dale Earnhardt passed on in 2001, no driver has been lifeless in a NASCAR Cup Series race. Not one. Crashes still happen, cars still flip, burn, and slam into walls. But the outcomes are different now. The drivers walk away. That wasn't always the case. Before Dale's passing, lifelessness was part of the sport. Drivers braced for it, families lived with it. Now, for the first time, it became possible to imagine a NASCAR where demise wasn't recorded. Looking back, Dale's crash wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. It forced a billion-dollar industry to pause, to admit its failures, and to rebuild from the inside out. Every safer helmet, every stronger seatbelt, every foam-padded wall, it all came too late for Dale Earnhardt. But not too late for the hundreds of drivers who followed. In a way, Dale became the hero he'd never intended to be. He didn't sacrifice himself. He just raced the way he always had, fearless, full throttle. But in the end, his passing did more than all his victories ever could. His number 3 car will never be forgotten, but neither will the legacy of safety that followed. NASCAR became a safer place not just because it had to, but because it couldn't afford to lose another Dale Earnhardt. The effect that tore through NASCAR.
Car, it come around. I think it's going to be okay. We've got a good engine in it, but a little wind today. A little exciting. I think it's going to be some exciting racing. Going to see something you probably hadn't never seen on Fox.
The emotional aftermath of Dale's passing hit like a massive wave. Fans held candlelight vigils. They painted the number 3 on car windows and church signs. They left flowers, photos, and handwritten letters at the gates of Dale Earnhardt Inc. Some drove cross-country just to stand in silence outside his garage. For weeks, sports talk radio was focused on Dale's passing. Grown men cried on air. Kids who had worn his gear since kindergarten called in. Tributes poured in from every direction. NFL players wore number 3 stickers on their helmets. Baseball teams held moments of silence before spring training games. President George W. Bush released a statement honoring Earnhardt's impact as a national icon. Even people who had never watched a race felt the weight of the loss. Inside NASCAR, the grief came with urgency. Teams scrambled to check their seatbelts, helmets, and safety systems. Richard Childress, Dale's team owner and longtime friend, found himself frozen in heartbreak. He had been like a brother to Earnhardt. The two had won championships together, cried together, and fought side by side for nearly 2 decades. Now he had to lead a team in mourning. Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was just 26 years old at the time, suddenly became more than a young driver. He became the face of his father's legacy. Fans looked to him not only for wins, but for emotional strength. And despite his pain, Junior showed up. 1 week later, he climbed back into a car at Rockingham. The world held its breath. No one expected a win, but he finished in the top 10. It was a silent statement. He would carry the torch. At DEI, Teresa Earnhardt faced the hardest job in NASCAR, running her late husband's company. She was a private person, rarely interviewed, often misunderstood, but she held the business together in the eye of a storm. Sponsors questioned their future. Teams were shaken, but somehow the shop stayed open. And not just open, strong. Beyond the track, Dale Earnhardt's passing created a shift in how Americans thought about motorsports. Suddenly, NASCAR was being covered on national news, late-night talk shows, and in magazines that had never once mentioned a stock car. Safety experts, physicists, and trauma surgeons weighed in. Families who had lost loved ones in racing finally had the world's attention. Memorials started popping up everywhere. A massive mural of Dale was painted in his hometown of Kannapolis, North Carolina. Fans created shrines in their garages, complete with mini flags, similar cars, and worn-out black hats. On TV, documentaries began airing, each one trying to make sense of what had happened. And then came the tribute laps. Race after race, cars took to the track in the formation of the number 3. Drivers held up 3 fingers during parade laps. On the 3rd lap of races that year, entire grandstands would rise in silent tribute. No chants, no cheers. Just a moment for the man who had defined an era. For NASCAR itself, the branding shifted. Earnhardt wasn't just a racer anymore. He became a symbol. Black t-shirts with white block letters sold in the millions. Legends never die. The impact on future drivers was deep and personal. Jeff Gordon, Dale's longtime rival, admitted he didn't fully get what Dale meant to the sport until he was gone. Tony Stewart, visibly emotional in interviews, started wearing the Hans device religiously. Rookie drivers entering the Cup Series carried a weight. They were now part of a sport that had buried its king. Years passed, but the scar remained. The number 3 stayed off the track for a long time. When it finally returned, driven by Austin Dillon in 2014, fans had mixed emotions. Some saw it as a tribute, others called it too soon. But when Dylan took that number to victory lane at Daytona, 13 years after Dale's passing, it felt like a full-circle moment. But let's not forget what was lost. A father, a husband, a friend, a fierce competitor. He had that look that made you feel like you were in on a joke. The way he'd lean into a reporter's mic and say something that would leave fans talking for weeks. Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a driver, he was NASCAR's soul. Dale Earnhardt's legacy in racing is one that still lives on. Even after his tragic passing in 2001, he made a mark as one of the toughest and most fearless drivers to ever hit the NASCAR track. With a career that lasted over 2 decades, Dale won a total of 76 races and took home 7 Winston Cup championships, tying the record held by Richard Petty at the time. Fans loved him not just for his skills, but for his bold personality. He drove with heart, never backed down, and always gave everything on the track. Dale's black number 3 car became a symbol of pride and power in NASCAR history. After his passing, the entire racing world mourned, but his impact didn't end there. His son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., followed in his footsteps and carried on the family name. The NASCAR Hall of Fame honored him in 2010, showing just how much he meant to the sport. Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a racer, he was a legend whose name will never be forgotten. He talked about his cars, 012 to 018, and in a cruel twist, the same race where he passed on had given him so much joy. His cars finished first and second. He had been protecting his son, mentoring his teammate, and watching the future unfold right before his eyes. In those last laps, Dale wasn't racing for glory. He was racing for legacy. Even now, more than 2 decades later, people still talk about that day like it just happened. Because when someone like Dale Earnhardt passes, time doesn't move the same. Today, many racing fans still wear number 3 hats, shirts, and stickers, a clear sign that Dale's memory is still strong. His crash wasn't just a physical event, it was emotional, cultural, and deeply human. What are your best memories of Dale Earnhardt? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.